Welcome to the Rainmaker Multiplier on Demand, a podcast for leading financial professionals, or rainmakers, and their teams that offer support for securing a successful future. From marketing help to staffing structure, listen and subscribe for actionable insights from advisors and skilled professionals alike.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Rainmaker Multiplier podcast. Thank you for joining us today. I am your host, Matt Seitz, Chief Marketing Officer here at C2P, and we've got a great topic today. I think a lot of you are going to be interested in this, as we hear this a lot in our network here in our C2P community, the importance of your spend and the ROI on marketing. And with that, we have the perfect guest for that, Cary Chaitoff. Cary is our Vice President of Marketing here at C2P Enterprises and heading up our marketing agency here at C2P. Cary is a strategic marketing leader with over 20 years experience driving business growth through integrated marketing campaigns with expertise spanning strategic planning, lead generation, and developing high-performing teams, and has a proven track record in the wealth management industry. Like I said, landing perfect here for this topic today, Cary. And I guess we'll start with that just from your bio. Over 20 years experience driving that growth and in the wealth management industry. Hear that I guess term, phrase, return on investment a lot. And you've seen that working with very small offices up to very large ones at the broker dealer you've been at before. Where do you approach ROI in terms of that can mean a lot of different things depending if you're talking about business growth, marketing or business development as a whole, or individual marketing campaigns. How do you approach that when you're looking at a business as a whole delivering on ROI?
Yeah, Matt, thanks for having me. It's always nice to talk with you. You're actually spot on in terms of helping identify what is an ROI. And for those listening, ROI stands for return on investment. You can look at it in many ways. One, you can certainly look at it as how many dollars am I spending and what is the equivalent of assets under management or revenue that I'm receiving from a pure black and white perspective. I would contend that many advisors aren't even at that level. They're just starting out. And what's a reasonable return on investment? And a return on investment in that case may require no out-of-pocket money, but it may require resources. And maybe they have that expertise. Maybe their team can help develop strategies. They can help develop positioning. They may be able to write blogs and content. And so really what your investment is goes beyond the pure, simple fact of how much money did I spend, because there's opportunity cost for everything. So really what an advisor has to think about is the effort that they're putting forth. Is it giving them a payback? And again, it may not be a dollar payback. For an example, advisory firms all of their employees should have the same elevator speech, should be able to describe their firm's solutions, services, and targets consistently. So is that worth an hour lunch, 2-hour lunch, where all of your advisors sit around and you have a consistent, compelling, unique value proposition? I would certainly argue, yes, that's certainly worth two pizzas and an hour discussion. So all of your employees are saying the same thing. That will help build your brand. Is that a payback, a return on your investment? I would say absolutely it is. So really, I would say an ROI is all dependent the level and what an advisor is trying to achieve. So always start with the objective in mind.
Got it. Yeah, and I know that's something you and I have talked about before too, is I think a lot of companies, and that not just in our industry here, but they spend a lot perfecting their brand. What does the logo look like? What is the tagline? What is their messaging? And they focus a lot of those on the marketing and sales teams with that outgoing message. But as you said, what happens the first time they call into the front desk? Or everyone in a company is a salesperson, whether they want to face that or not. Everyone is representing that brand. So even if you are at your kid's soccer game or at a neighborhood party, to your point, it's worth that time investing with all of your employees to make sure that they have that brand messaging down, those, whatever you want to call them, whether it's marketing statements or elevator pitch or that, but that's all of that goes back into playing into the ROI for the time the company's spending on that.
Yeah, man, that's a really good thought in terms of taking a prospect through your client journey. So every touch point, and that touch point starts with perhaps your website. What does your website communicate? The colors they use, the tonality to the first time somebody calls, and what is your receptionist, administrative assistant? How are they answering the phone? To how does your lobby look? It's all about brand and perceptions. So you certainly don't want your website to come off in one way, your receptionist coming in another way, yet your advisor comes off a different way. So it is personas, it's the personalities. And again, defining your brand really constitutes each touch point. So really good point in terms of it even starts before you ever said, what color brand should I have and what should my logo look like? But rather, who are we? What's the tone? And all of that really dictates the rest of your branding and your marketing efforts.
Yeah, and I know I'm big on that. I know we are here at C2P with our team. It's like the stuff that happens before you're going to go spend the external dollars, the ad dollars, is what are you taking care of in-house? We've done the presentation before, the stop spending money on new leads, somewhat the facetious title, but it's make sure it's the processes and things in-house, because a lot of advisors, a lot of you listening or watching today, you might have a giant book of prospects or leads in your database right now that you could be leveraging on that side of an ROI where you don't have to spend the ad dollars, but it's spending the time or the internal resources, or if you don't have a marketing team, using an agency like ours to help you build those out to make sure that those kind of internal marketing and sales processes are in place, right?
That's exactly right. So really get your house in order. Do everything you can before you even spend $1 on a Facebook ad, promoting a certain post, running a community event. There are so many marketing tactics you can do before spending $1. Again, many advisors don't have a lot of time. Their staff is fully efficient and maxed out on hopefully good business development ideas and servicing clients. So really it has to come down to, do you have the capabilities? Do you have the time internally? Or do you need to leverage those that are experts, leverage opportunities that people can do things for you more efficiently, or walk you through a blueprint of how to achieve success when it comes to marketing?
Yeah, and I think now we're setting the stage for getting into spending the dollars, whether it's on your team or whether that's on ads or business development activities, events, things like that. But you and I were talking beforehand too of really the thing to get in order when we're saying, what is the ROI from what we're about to do? Either that campaign, or maybe if you're putting, like right now, putting your annual plan together of what are the expectations of that ROI is, and are there some that are at a campaign level versus an aggregate level of marketing versus business development? So can you talk about that, of what we mean by the expectations of ROI?
Yeah, really the ROI needs to start with your business goals, because without your understanding of your business goals and everybody marching to that same objective, certainly your marketing needs has to support that. And you have to understand, if you're purely looking at a growth revenue of X million in investable assets to manage, the challenge I would have for everyone listening is, so how does that mean to how many clients do you need in that case? Let's back that up. What's your average investable assets balance size for your clients? How many prospects does it require to become a client? How many prospects before you get a right fit call or a discovery call, depending on what you want to label those? And so work all the way back to an introduction, to an awareness of your brand, to then some type of engagement. And the engagement certainly could be downloading an ebook, attending a webinar, to more of a more intimate engagement of perhaps attending a live event, perhaps attending a referral event, a community event, somewhere where they actually talk to your advisors one-on-one. Then once you have that, how many of those become a right fit call? How many become eventually a client? How long does it take you to transfer those dollars into your firm? So again, it all needs to start with, if we're going to grow 10 million, 40 million, 50 million in a given year, how many prospects does that mean you need to talk to and work your way back. It also depends on ROIs in terms of who's your niche, who's your audience. Are you going to get this business growth of your $10 million from your existing referrals, from your existing client base? Are you going to get that from center of influencers? Are you going to get those through educational webinars? Where are you going to get those? So again, just because you have a business goal of 10 million in gross net assets, you have to also figure out where is that coming from. And therefore, all of your employees have to align. Therefore, your marketing has to align. And that to me would be one way to think about how do you think top down opposed to bottom up. Otherwise, you're going to have everybody working on their own thing of saying, we need this piece of collateral. We need to run an ad on this local newspaper. I'm going to run some radio ads. I'm going to run boosted post social content, et cetera, et cetera.
No, that's great. I know I've talked to a lot of advisors about that too. I call it that waterfall. What are the business goals and metrics that we're trying to hit, and working backwards all the way down as you just laid out. And it's also why it's so important to make sure that the marketing and sales or marketing business development, whatever you're calling it at your firms, are tied together as well. Because the more silos you have of marketing versus business development versus your leadership team, maybe depending on the size of your organization, those metrics and those goals to achieve whatever that desired ROI is have to be aligned. Like you said, Cary, is what are the assets, new assets you want to hit at the end of the day, or new clients? And then how many does it take going through the process to get there? How many right fit calls at bats do you need to get into that? So working all the way back into that. And then ultimately that's when, once you know what those all are backing into it, that's when you can get into the campaign level ROI. I know we're very open and share what we're doing at the JL Smith level. If we're talking like all the way down to an office level, because we get asked that a lot of where are we seeing the best ROI, because we do a lot of marketing and business development there. But we share a lot with the AFIAs that we do, and we do a lot of virtual webinars as well. And those are very different in terms of the results and the spends on each. And we tend to get more conversions from the AFIA because those are in person. You make that connection. You develop that rapport right away. It tends to be a shorter sales cycle. On the webinar side, they tend to be lower cost, but your conversion rate is a lot lower. However, we have tended to see a lot more high net worth clients from those, because those that maybe can't make it to an in-person workshop after hours because they're working long hours or off hours, they're able to watch and convert from those webinars in the middle of the evening when they're watching a replay or something like that. So at the end, the reason I share that long story is at the end of the day, when we go back and look at those, they have very similar ROIs, but we get it at very different ways. And that's why it's good to take a step back and look at that when you're measuring the ROI overall to say, is this worth our spend? And for those that maybe aren't doing all of those, are you diversifying your marketing efforts enough and not just going all in on one? And I know you do that with a lot of the clients that you work with here. Is sometimes it's baby steps into it. You can't do everything at once like we're doing at JL Smith. We've certainly built that over time, but I know that that's what you're doing with those clients, is figuring out where's the best place to start. And really that comes down to where's your audience at, right?
Yeah, Meg, you bring up an interesting point. Is let's think about marketing, not just spending on marketing as how much did you spend on ads, right? There's so much that goes to marketing. And many of the advisors we work with, they certainly range from those that have just started out and may have $25 million in assets to certainly much, much larger. But it really starts of, do you have your foundation set, right? Do you have a website? Do you have a social presence? Are you posting content? Does your collateral look and feel like it's coming from you and not honestly just cover up the logo and it could come from any of 1,000 other firms? And so I think it's really a good idea to think about, is your baseline, is your base, your benchmark, whatever you want to call it, and set little baby steps. So don't think about, I've got to drop 6 different direct mail campaigns and have 12 different educational webinars and have 3 referral events each year. Start small and build off of that, because you will see the results. Because if you go from 0 to 60, you're going to be spread too thin. And that's something that I've seen advisors is they're really just starting out and they want a slew of leads to come in today when they have no brand awareness, they have no distinction, they have no identification of who their target audience is beyond 50 to 60 with 5 million in investable assets. Well, there's probably not a listener on this podcast that is going to claim that they're not interested in someone that's within 3 or to 5 years of retirement, right? With a large rollover and perhaps stock options. You know, really understand who your audience is, and then you can start developing very specific tactics. And again, when I say specific tactic, it means your website is identifying those individuals you want to reach. It means your content calendar is all about who you want to reach. And then you start developing perhaps some paid ads of who you want to reach. But I will tell you, we see more success with our advisors who are more focused on their target audience and their positioning than those that kind of want to just spray and hit anybody that's willing to listen to us.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring that up on the messaging too, because that can't be lost in that. Those that are listening and are like, hey, where can I start on this journey? Because I think both of us would say, I don't recommend just going out and spending money on leads. Starting with that, we know we've used this example before, coming right from our president here, Dave Allison Wealth Management. Dave consistently at the top of our leaderboard list. Dave stated, if someone came to your website or went to your social channels and your audience, if you want high net worth or ultra high net worth clients, does that speak to them? Does that resonate with them? If you haven't updated your website in 10, 15 years, that probably does not speak to that audience, where, like you said, they can very easily go to another financial advisor's website that really speaks to that ultra high net worth or high net worth audience. And they're going to make that connection from the content and the persona that they're speaking to on there. So making sure that you have your house in order.
Well, let's not just focus on your websites, which is, you're absolutely right, but also think about your LinkedIn. What do you position yourself as an advisor? Are you positioning yourself and stating all of your credentials? Are you making it easy for someone to look at your LinkedIn bio and realize this is someone that I want to do business with? Do you have a company LinkedIn profile? Unfortunately, many advisors don't have a corporate page, and I think it's really important. However, having said it's really important, make sure if you have one that you're keeping it current and fresh. Just don't open one and say, I've checked the box, but rather you need to really, again, based on who you're trying to attract, make sure you have content that's appealing to them. So oftentimes when you see an ad, somebody is going to say, that's interesting. I saw an advisor named Matt. I'm going to go to his website. That's really interesting. It looks like they know everything about what I'm interested in, and that speaks to me and my family, my wife, my personal situation. Now, the website speaks well, but now I'm going to understand who is Matt, and I'm going to now go into his LinkedIn profile. And unfortunately, there are advisors out there that may not have much of a description about themselves, or may not have updated it for 5 or 10 years. And as we all know, social media changes, I was going to say day by day, but we'll at least say week by week. And there are communications, there are certifications, there are speaking engagements that you all have done that you certainly should be highlighting on your LinkedIn profile along with your website.
Got it. I guess the other side of ROI, obviously, we got to start delivering the results on that. And ROI, the easy button is to say it means revenue or number of new clients. But obviously, there's a lot of things that lead up to that. That's why we talk a lot about know your numbers. And you have to know both sides. What are your targets that you discussed earlier, of what are the goals that you're going to be hitting, whether it's a campaign level, annual level, quarterly, whatever that is. But I think it's important to start at the beginning, because there's a lot of advisors, a lot of business owners out there, even outside of this industry, that say, I haven't been doing this. I haven't been doing a good job, and it's okay. But we tell them you have to start somewhere and start tracking even at the beginning. So maybe you could get into some of those in terms of some of the, we'll say, entry-level campaigns that they might start doing once they do start spending those dollars. Things like measuring the registrants or number of downloads or followers, things like that. Do you have any recommendations on where they might want to start?
I do. So we've talked about websites, and I really believe that every advisor should have Google Analytics connected to their website. It allows you to see how many visitors are coming to your website, what pages people are coming to, what pages people are going to and then dropping off of your website. Where are people going on your forums? There's lots of different avenues to be able to track the effectiveness of your website. Part of that is certainly traffic. Part of that is understanding keywords of where are people coming and where are they coming from to identify certain topics that are of value. Certainly tracking the eyeballs on whether it's your blogs or listens to your podcasts. How many people are listening, and are they listening all the way through? And which topics are people attracted to? So there's a lot of things that people are already perhaps putting in the marketplace and saying, I write a blog every month. My pushback is, are people reading it? It is unfortunately a field of dreams where you're going to build it and people will come. So you have to promote it and you have to understand what are people coming from. Oftentimes I see several reasons why marketing isn't a priority for a firm or isn't effectively managed. One is that there's no plan in place. And you always have to start with a plan. Otherwise, again, think about it. You're traveling down the road without a compass. So you don't ultimately know where you're going to end up. Another reason people don't succeed in marketing is they have no consistency. So they may have run an ad. They may have written a blog that said, on the blog, I put up a social post and we only had 3 people click on it or view it. So therefore, it doesn't work. One thing I would challenge you is if you have more than 3 employees at that firm, I would certainly hope that you have more than 3 views. So make sure all of your employees are following you, your corporation on LinkedIn is resharing, is commenting on everything you put out there. If you can't believe that your employees are going to do it, certainly don't expect the general public to have a higher level of engagement. Another thing is, other than consistency, is not being patient, right? That kind of goes hand in hand with consistency. I did it once or twice. It didn't work. My argument would be, but is that really enough? And also, the final one would be not setting the proper expectations. The first time you set up a blog, if 5 people read it, great. What do you expect in a year from now? So again, it's really about that plan. What would be the right outcome of everything you do? Are you giving it really a good run for? And then are you setting the right expectations? If you've said, yes, I set the proper expectations and I've been consistent, I'm going to challenge you to say, what have you learned from it? Because if you haven't learned from it, then we go back to your original question of what are some of the things that you should be tracking. If you cannot track an initiative, don't do it. So that's where I would start off in marketing. And those are some of the things, Matt, I would look at that are generally free of cost to measure.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that one piece too about what you learn from it, because I know you and I share that with our team here and a lot of our advisors. It's not failure if you've learned something from it. And how can we continue to get better? How can we evolve in that? And we see that a lot with the consistency. Unfortunately, I see it a lot more in this industry than in past. I know you and I have worked together before where we tend to see almost that hamster wheel of, hey, I heard of this marketing strategy or tactic that another advisor used. I bought into that. Day 2, week 2, however you want to define that. I went to implement it. I was either confused. I didn't have the time. I didn't have the skill set, capacity, whatever you want to say. So I got frustrated. I abandoned it. I heard of a new one and jumped at that. We call that the shiny object syndrome there. So I adopt that one, throw out the first one and move on. And I see that's where a lot of, marketing doesn't work. Business development doesn't work. And it all comes back to what you just said, like the patience and the consistency. That's why you got to create that plan and stick to it. And if you as the advisor listening or your team doesn't have the knowledge, skill set, capacity to execute on some of these, it's okay. It's that who, not how that we talk about here a lot. And I know Jason talks about that in his podcasts here and from stage of find the right people to do that, because it could just be that it was poor execution on that end to make sure that we're following through. Because if we follow through that consistency and you have the plan in place, you should see results. It just might not be right away. We talk about that. Like I said, we are very open with JL Smith and Cary, your team, helping as our marketing arm over there. We certainly have webinars where we don't get anyone on the calendar in terms of a discovery meeting from that. We might go 2 or 3 in a row. But then the next one, we might schedule 8 people out of the next one. And that's why we know if we stick to the plan and do that. Now, I know not everyone has the same funds, same resources, things like that, but that's where you got to know you have that. I know we've also shared before Caleb Mackey from our team, when he had his advisory practice. Caleb has shared his story of when they finally bought in and started using White Glove, one of our partners here. And they ran their first 2 in-person workshops and didn't get a single, they got meetings. They did not get any conversions out of that after spending that much to use White Glove. Then he said when they finally did their third one, that's when it hit. And they got several clients from that. And from then on, the wheel was going. So it took a little while to ramp that up. It wasn't an overnight thing. But I love sharing that story on behalf of Caleb because it shows that they stuck to the plan, they stuck with it, and obviously it worked out in the long term. But that resiliency and sticking to the plan is what ultimately paid off there.
Yeah, even in that example, I want people to understand that although you may not have gotten a client engagement on day one, but hopefully you have acquired 10, 15, 20 new emails or contacts. And I don't want the folks listening to this to dismiss that I didn't get any immediate return on investments. Everything that you do needs to be tracked in a CRM platform. How did they come to you? What was the topic? And you need to be following up. If you have no follow-up and you expect things to close from one ad, from one webinar, I would go back and perhaps go back to one of the things I said, you don't have proper expectation sets. It is wonderful. There are a few activities that you may get an immediate payback. In general, though, it is wonderful to have a couple hundred or 1,000 individuals that you're sending a monthly email to. And it's not just your general market, but those 1,000, hopefully you have them segmented perhaps by age and perhaps by interest, based on gender, based on their business occupation, whatever the case may be, whether they have grandchildren. And why are all these things so important in CRM is because if you're sending the same generic email to all 1,000, you're not doing it correctly. You really need to communicate with individuals and how did they come to you. Going back to your example, the first 2 webinars may not have, or seminars may not have resulted in immediate business, but I would suspect that some of those people that did engage on day one perhaps did become a client somewhere down the road. Or they may have said something, you know what, I haven't done business with this firm, but they provide a lot of really good insights on my situation, and you ought to try calling them. And again, what does that person do? They first look at your website, then they go to your LinkedIn, and then they ultimately decide, sure, as somebody that has investable assets of $1 million to $5 million to $10 million, I'm going to make that call.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned too, tracking all that in the CRM. That's why it is a big thing. And I can't stress this enough. If you can measure this in your CRM, and even if you can't, maybe you can do it in Excel for now, or call Cary, his team. They'll help you figure this out. But both at JL Smith and C2P, we measure diligently. There's a big difference between lead source and booking source. And that's what Cary was getting at there is we want to know when you're talking ROI, everyone immediately jumps to how many ended up joining. They became a client, how much in assets they, but a lot of your different marketing and business development activities, a lot of them can have an impact on someone finally taking that meeting or finally becoming a client. What's the lead source? What got them into your system? And then what's the booking source? What did they do that finally got them to say, yes, I'm going to take that meeting? Because if you're measuring those separately, that can help optimize your marketing and sales plan over time, because that lead source, and we've seen it time and time again, Cary, you're doing that with several of our clients. That lead source might be a very low cost option, running some Facebook ads for an ebook that you might be getting someone in at $6 to $10 to $15 per lead. And now they're in your database and you can drip on them with the email nurtures that you mentioned. But the booking source might be 6 months later when they're finally ready to make a decision and you've invited them to a business development event. You've invited them to an in-person, maybe it's a client appreciation event where they get to network and they decide, all right, now's the time that I'm ready to move forward. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how you're doing those with the clients that we work with or over at JL Smith in terms of the importance of managing both lead and booking source.
Yeah, Matt, what you're getting at is really attribution. So it could certainly be looked at many different ways, and attribution is a whole industry and science within itself. And I certainly don't expect many advisors to really understand multi-touch attribution. But really what we're talking about today is who are you, what tactics are you attributing to the first introduction? And perhaps what's the last attribution? In your example, they came in through a Facebook ad, and the last attribution may have been a educational seminar, a referral event, a community event, could have been entertainment of taking someone to a basketball game, the theater, whatever the case may be. So you have to understand which tactics are at the beginning of the funnel and which ones are more at the end of the funnel. And certainly we've used this in the past. There are certainly tactics that are better in terms of the later, meaning someone that's going to engage with you later. And there are other marketing initiatives that are more centered to they'll convert soon. And then the now bucket, as we've talked about the buckets,
Right.
The now bucket is, and we reference this, is anything that allows you to have one-on-one contact, high engagement, pull someone aside and talk about who your firm is and their problems, right? And how you can solve their individual problems. That's really difficult through a Facebook ad or through a social post. But those social posts and those blogs are a way to introduce and reinforce your credibility. So when you do have the opportunity to spend time with the prospect on one, they're already sold on you. Now it's not just about you, but it's how can you solve my problems? I'm going to open up and communicate what my problems are because I am convinced, because I'm standing right next to you, because I'm a high net worth individual and I left my job an hour ago before I'm eating dinner with my wife and family. And now I'm engaging with you on my way home because it's that important.
Great. Cary, as we wrap things up, and today's podcast went by very quickly as usual. Any last minute tips or points for where to get started for that advisor listening saying, yes, I want to get serious about creating a plan this year, figuring out what those metrics are I want to hit so that I get my desired ROI, whatever that might be. And any tips for a starting point there?
When you're talking about business planning, make sure there's an element of marketing, whether you have someone in-house or a third party you want to engage. Share what your metrics are. If you don't track it, then don't expect it to happen. And I think that's really important where you start out. So every time I speak with an advisor who's looking for marketing, I'm just trying to understand what their business is about and where can we, in some cases, that's going straight to associations. It may be going straight to targeting federal employees because their website already says it. You already have your certifications. We may be going to a speaking engagement or public relations. So really understand what is your plan, who do you want to focus on, and what are reasonable expectations. Don't expect all of your payback to happen in month 1, 2, or 3. This is part of your business. And you really need to think about marketing just as you think about all of your employees and your physical location and everything else that goes into running a business. If you're spending zero on marketing, you certainly are at a void. And frankly, we have a lot of advisors out there that are very aggressive in marketing. So if you're not talking to a prospect, somebody else is. And my parting words is have a business plan and understand the component. And frankly, you need to allocate some resources to achieve this correctly. And as I mentioned earlier, those resources could be time, and you may have all of that expertise in-house, or you may want to think about engaging others. And when I say engaging others, there's certainly a lot of platforms out there. There's a lot of website platforms that people leverage, whether that's an FMG, a Snappy Kraken, a Broadridge. All three of them have wonderful information and content that you can leverage, you can personalize for your website, for your social content, for emails. Now, if you feel that you need something even more advanced, you can certainly modify that, whether that's in-house with writers or elsewhere. I would tell you, though, when it comes to spending media, I would probably look at doing that out of house, unless you've got somebody that has experience, because it isn't as simple as just opening a Meta account and running ads. We haven't gotten into the A/B testing, but there's a lot of different creative. There's ad campaigns, there's optimization, and then there's certainly evaluation of every campaign. Some things I would certainly encourage our advisors to do in-house, and there's other things as they advance beyond the basics to start thinking about how do they use their time and money most effectively?
Great. No, that's certainly a have to spend money to make money industry. And that's why we have our marketing roundtable group to share that information with the advisors in our network. It's why we openly share what we're doing over at JL Smith to show the value in the marketing spend, that if you're going to spend those dollars, the ROI is there. And this is certainly part of it. So, Cary, thank you very much for sharing that wealth of knowledge today. For all of you tuning in, if you are with C2P in our community, just a reminder that you have access to the marketing planning e-learning course on our LMS. And for those, whether you're with us or not, interested in talking to C2P about our marketing agency and how you can get help developing and executing that plan to get the results in ROI that you're looking for, please feel free to visit our site and reach out to Cary and his team directly. And we'll get you connected and make sure that you are off on the right foot and heading towards those desired results. So thank you again, Cary, and thank you all for tuning in today.
Thanks for tuning in. This podcast was brought to you by C2P, an organization whose purpose is to educate, train, grow, and support holistic financial advisors so families can achieve true prosperity. Never miss an episode by subscribing now to discover new resources and strategies. Visit c2penterprises.com to learn how we can help scale and secure your business. At the time of delivery and any subsequent publishing, information was deemed reliable, but is subject to change by the time of listening or viewing. The contents of this piece include options and projections of C2P, are subject to change, and are for informational purposes only. The information provided in this presentation is not intended to be individual investment, tax, or legal advice.